Mets talk live, we keep it raw. Sipping on Henny, we breaking the law. Queens represent, bitches know the name. New York Mets, we bringing the flame. So raise your glass, here's to the Mets. Ballin' harder than the rest, no regrets. City feel rockin', the vibe's electric. Ain't no stopping us, we getting hectic. Riding with the crew, we do it right. Mets in our soul, we ballin' all night. Queens to the core, we bringing the ruckus. Shout out to the fans, we live in the touch. Playoff dreams, we stacking the wins. Mets talk live, let the madness begin.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Mets Talk Live right here on the channel. Hopefully, everybody's enjoying their football Sunday, but we got a lot of baseball talk here tonight, and of course, all about our New York Mets. So make sure you hit on that like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, guys, so there hasn't been much since the New York Mets have signed Juan Soto to that record-breaking deal, $765 million over just a little bit of time, about 15 years or so. Most of us will be very young at that point, but that's okay, guys, because the New York Mets have a total roster to fill, and they still got a lot of work to do. And you do wonder, what is David Stearns thinking when it comes to this roster? Is he going to get a top-line starter, or is he going to go into tier B type pitching and put a bunch of quality rotation or quantity rotation over quality? And I've had a problem with that since day one. And I understand why they did what they did last year in regards to the pitchers that they signed and traded for that matter. But this is a whole new offseason. This is a season that we're going into that was supposed to be guns blazing, pedal to the metal, go for it, 2025 season. That's what we were told. And there was a lot of Met fans in this chat and on social media that continued to talk about, especially before the 2024 season started, saying that this was a transition year. 2025 is the year to go for it. And this is supposed to be the case. And I think we all believed it. We all understand that. But Juan Soto was only one piece to this puzzle. And besides Frankie Montas, which was like, okay, understandable, back in the rotation type of guy, not the end of the world. And then we signed Clay Holmes to a 3-year, $38 million deal, technically trying to put him as a starter, or at least give him an opportunity to become a starter. If not, they'll throw him into the bullpen, which I believe he belongs. And then there has nothing else happened. It's been very quiet in the NL East as acquisition mode. We know the Phillies have tried multiple times to get certain players. They were trying for Kyle Tucker. I thought their offer was hilarious, as they were trying to give Alec Boehm and Nick Castellanos, and the Astros probably laughed while hanging up the phone. So besides the Mets getting Juan Soto, Frankie Montas, and Clay Holmes, the NL East has basically stayed quiet. Besides the Nationals getting the number 1 overall pick in the draft, the Braves really haven't done nothing. The Phillies haven't done nothing. And you could say the Phillies are the Phillies, but they are losing a couple of bullpen arms. Their lineup is the lineup. Their pitching is the pitching at this point. The Braves looking like they don't want to spend any money, and they just lost Max Fried. So there's a lot to look at when it comes to where the New York Mets are in the NL East, how much they have to do with this roster, and the lack of movement from the Phillies and the Braves are kind of eye-opening a little bit, because you don't really know. The Mets made the wild card last year. They were the third team in. They were one of the last teams in. The Phillies won the division. So it's like, what is it really, right? Are the Mets improved because they got Juan Soto, and the Braves and the Phillies at this moment have done nothing? Obviously, the Mets need a first baseman. There's still some talk about the possibility of getting an infielder that we will talk about, but it is very interesting to look at it from a different perspective and just, take a step back and look at it as a whole. There's a lot going on, yet there is so little being done in the NL East, and the Mets are a part of that. Besides back into the rotation guys and Juan Soto. Now that should be the icing on the cake. Juan Soto should be the icing on the cake, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's not even the cherry on top. It's just you started to bake the cake. There's a lot more that goes into getting the final details to the cake. And I know I'm using a lot of euphemisms and little quotes and sayings and stuff like that, but it's true, right? I think all the Met fans are frustrated at this point. We all know we need a top line starter. We all know that the Mets need another bat in this lineup, and that's why you're starting to hear more about Alonso, more about Bregman, the possibility of Nolan Arenado trade, which is kind of going on the back burner a little bit, which I understand. I don't think the Mets are going down that route unless it ends up being a complete 180 in their plans where Alonso actually doesn't want to be here and goes somewhere else, and Alex Bregman, signs elsewhere. And there's a lot that you have to look at if that's the possibility, because now you really have to, figure out another plan. And, Arenado might be a plan, and it's not the most exciting plan, but it's a plan nonetheless. Either if we like it or not, it could be a lot worse. You could have Brett Beatty at third base. So I'm starting to look at the comments, guys. I'm sorry. We got about 140 in the chat right now. Make sure you hit that like button, guys. I'm just checking the comments really quickly. Let's see. Stearns is hesitant to make moves. I don't get it. Yeah, I wouldn't say hesitant to make moves. I think he's very methodical in his process. I think he thinks about every scenario, right? He thinks about a lot of what if scenarios. And I know that's not the best thing as a GM, but I understand certain prospects you don't want to give. What I don't understand is that when you have this much money coming off the payroll, you sign Juan Soto to the massive deal that's around $51 million, but there's about $75 to $76 million left before you even get to that third CBT luxury tax threshold, and you can get Burns, you can get Alonso, and you'll probably just hit that number, maybe a few $1 million over. And at that point, you're already paying the tax, the highest tax, regardless of how much you go over. So I don't understand the logic either, but I'm not going to kill a guy for certain guys that maybe the Mets could have been after, or some people wanted the Mets to go after, like a Max Fried. I know some people talk a little, well, why didn't the Mets get Devin Williams? The Yankees really didn't give up much. Durbin is one of their top 5 prospects, and Nestor Cortez is a back end of the rotation type of starter. I'm not saying that's a boatload, but we don't know what the Milwaukee Brewers were targeting here, right? There was talks about the Yankees having Durbin play second base this year on the New York Yankees. So if the Brewers are thinking the same thing, well, guess what? Durbin's going to be their second baseman going into the 2025 season. So, I'm not saying the Mets couldn't do it. Maybe the Mets didn't want to just give up one prospect and a major league player for a rental, which Devin Williams is. I don't know. But I do know that David Stearns has a process. And as much as we can't stand it, he hasn't really been wrong. For the most part, he's actually been very good in his acquisitions. He's been very good about putting together a roster over the first year, right? I mean, there was a lot of people that thought this team was going to lose 70, win 70 games this last year, and they didn't. They were on the verge of 90 wins, and they made the playoffs. So a lot can happen within this time. But again, it's not like Burns is off the board. All the middle of the road free agents, pitchers are basically out there still. A couple of trade targets are still possible, pitching wise. There's still Alonso still available. There's Bregman still available. Santander still available. I know Anthony Santander is maybe less likely, but again, this is a guy. Anthony Santander has played a little first base as well, and I know that's not going to excite a lot of people, but he is a switch hitter. I think some people like that, and I'm not saying that David Stearns is going to go that route, but he likes to rather give position players longer-term deals than others, than pitching free agents. So it I'm just so curious. I would love to be a fly on the wall just to listen to what David Stearns is talking amongst the other executives of the New York Mets and what his process is, because all we know, he could be playing a waiting game for Burns and Alonso to have their prices go down. At the end of the day, would anybody be shocked if Burns is a Boras client, Alonso's a Boras client? We know Alonso is going to be coming back to the Mets for a final, call. Why wouldn't Burns and Boras do the same thing? Say if the Giants offer him 8 years, $250 million. Let's just say I don't care about the AAV, but that's just a random number. You don't think Boras is going to call Steve Cohen and say, "Hey, I know you're looking for pitching. What do you think about this? Can you do better?" And maybe he just does. Maybe Stearns does that. I don't know. Right? He had Burns in his organization in Milwaukee, so there is a connection there. And I'm not saying, and it's been extremely quiet when it comes to Burns and the New York Mets. I mean, you heard more about Luis Castillo and the Mets connection, and even the Alex Bregman connection to the New York Mets than you have Corbin Burns. And I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing. Right? I truly don't believe that. I think the less news you hear about a player connected to the Mets, I think the better off we probably are. There's a possibility that the Mets are more in on Burns than we actually think. And would anybody be shocked if you wake up tomorrow morning and Burns is a Met? I mean, some people might be shocked, but the way that the Mets have been doing things over the last year and a half, leaks haven't been coming out at all. Right? The Montage signing came out of nowhere. I know Clay Holmes, there was interest in Clay Holmes, but there was like 10 teams that were interested in Clay Holmes. But you didn't, what I don't understand, you heard it, like the rumors with the Yankees, it was like a buildup. Like Bellinger was supposed to be a Yankee like 4 days ago. And it's still not done. Like it's crazy to me that when it comes to the Mets, it's either there's no news at all, and then bam, the breaking news happens, or there's a lot of rumors and nothing happens with the New York Mets. So I'm not saying that the Mets are in on Burns. What I'm saying is that just because it's quiet on the front of the player you might be targeting for the New York Mets doesn't mean that's not necessarily happening. So I'm not too concerned, but I am a little. I don't like the whole plan of just getting Sean Manaea and Walker Buehler and hope for Sasaki. And if you don't get Sasaki, all right, we got our Buehler and we got Manaea. And what I've been hearing about Kodai Senga and what David Stearns talked about the other day in one of his press conferences about Kodai Senga, that they're going to give him a 5th day of rest. Obviously, in a normal rotation, they get 4 days of rest and they pitch on the 5th day. So they're going to give Kodai Senga 5 days of rest before he pitches on the 6th day, which means the Mets are going to go to a 6-man rotation more often than not. And David Stearns said this, depending on off days, depending on if there's rainouts or something like that, and you play a lot less games within a week and a half span, they'll go to a 5-man rotation. So this is where Clay Holmes comes in, where he might be a starter maybe for 2 weeks, and then because days off and there's maybe not a lot of games within a week and a half, Clay Holmes will go to the bullpen. Like that seems like the idea behind that. But and for everybody who just thinks that Kodai Senga can be an ace, you have to pay attention here. You're counting on a guy who is not comfortable pitching every 5th day. I know he did it a little in 2023, but more often than not, they always try to give him an extra day off in 2023. Last year, obviously, he was hurt, so what's the point of talking about it? And they're talking about now having a 5th day of rest and pitching on the 6th day. And then this is the guy that you would need out there if there's a losing streak and you want to get that stopper out there. In the playoffs, is he going to pitch in a 7-game series, game 1, 5, and if he needs to come in game 7, would he be able to even pitch? Like, that's the whole point of an ace. I want an ace where I know that I can go to him 3 times in a 7-game series. at least twice, obviously twice in a 5-game series. That's what I want from an ace. There's no confidence in Kodai Senga, in my opinion, that when we get to the playoffs, that this guy can go game 1 and game 5, or game 1, 5, and 7 in a possibly 7-game series. That's what I don't feel confident in. That's why this Mets team needs an ace. And this leads right into our first topic of today, as the Mets have shown interest and has called the Seattle Mariners about Luis Castillo. And I think this is kind of a no-brainer. If Burns is not an option, or it should be an option, but let's say if it's not, let's put Burns aside for a second here, right? Burns hasn't signed anywhere yet, so I'm not calling the Mets out on this, but let's just put it to a side for a second. If the New York Mets take on, and I did the math, and I'm going to try to find it really quickly. Give me a second, guys. I did the math. All right, here we go. Let's see. All right, so there's $72.45 million left. So let's say $72.5 million left on Luis Castillo's contract for 3 more years. The 4th year, there's a vesting option for $25 million. I also wrote that down where, let's see, let me just give you the contract details really quickly before. All right, so the vesting option, he has to pitch 180 innings pitched in 2027. If Castillo misses 130 plus days between 2025 and 2027 due to a UCL injury, basically Tommy John, this becomes a $5 million team option. So it's a unique vesting option for 2020 for that 4th year. So again, this is a situation where you're getting a guy. Yes, it might cost you maybe between the top 7 and the top 15 prospect, and probably another lower level prospect along with taking their contract. Now, I believe you can probably get them on one minor top prospect. I would say probably 10 to 15, and give a prospect to them like that, and then take on the contract, because you got to understand how many teams will be willing to take on that entire contract that is looking for starting pitching. I'm not sure if there's that many. So the Mets might be in a good spot here. I don't think this is a stupid Kelnick for, Bruce and, I'm sorry, Cano and Diaz. Stearns is not an idiot, right? He's not going to overextend himself here, and he doesn't have to. We know the Mariners are trying to shed payroll because they want to bring a bat in this lineup. That has been the concern, right? They have 5 really good starting pitchers, and losing one of them, specifically Castillo, isn't going to hurt them too much. Their pitching was outstanding. The problem was their offense. They didn't have that other bat in that lineup that can help them score runs. And, it might be a situation where the Mets take on Castillo's contract. Seattle, has about 24 to 25 million extra on their payroll, and they can actually sign Pete Alonso. So you kind of hurt yourself in that aspect. But again, you can't be thinking about that when you're trying to bet in your rotation. And for people I see in the comments that you don't like Luis Castillo, why not? Everybody wants to bring Sean Manaea back. Luis Castillo had basically similar numbers, specifically in ERA. And Luis Castillo has been consistent over the last couple of seasons, and I'm gonna show you I'm gonna bring up the numbers right now. Right? Let's see. Hold on. I think I had them. I thought I had them. I don't have them. All right, I don't have them yet. But if you give me a second, I can pull them up right now. We can go over his stat line really quickly over the last couple of seasons. All right, here we go. All right, let's go take a look at the Luis Castillo stats. All right, so last year he had a 3.64. Year before that, he was an all-star at 3.34, 2022, 3.17, 2022, 2.86. So he's been consistently good. And yes, the ERA has gone up a little bit over those last couple of years. But again, we're talking about giving $100 million, because there's a pretty good chance that Sean Manaea is probably going to get 4 years here, around $24 to $25 million. The same amount of money you're going to pay Castillo around actually a few $1 million less you're going to pay Castillo, but you got that consistency that he's been providing the last couple of seasons, even last year. And when people look at the ERAs and they wonder why he hasn't, why his ERA has gone up a little bit, well, he's been pitching to more contact more. The home runs has been the home runs. That hasn't really changed with him. But his ERA has been going up because he's been pitching more of the contact. He's been trying to go deeper in the ball games. And the strikeouts have been a little bit down. Now, I still believe that change of scenery helps players. And I'm not saying, the Mets, you would just assume would be a better team than the Mariners. Sometimes you get that burst of energy. Sometimes you get into a better clubhouse. And, that happened to Sean Manaea. That happened to Luis Severino. That pitching lab can do wonders for a guy like Luis Castillo. And the thing is, guys, Luis Castillo is how old? He is 32 years old, right? 32 years old, right? So he's in right smack in the middle of, that edge of the prime. But again, he probably has like 2 or 3 years, probably really good left in him when that contract is most likely going to end. So you're saving a good chunk of change. You're getting this guy that has been consistently good for, especially last year, for the last couple of seasons, and you fit him into a rotation where that if you put him at the top of the rotation with a lineup that everybody expects is going to be able to score runs, I wouldn't be shocked that the Mets can score 5.5 to 6 runs per game, especially if you bring back Pete Alonso or if you add another bat that can provide that offense. And you already have Juan Soto, and you got Vientos, you got Alvarez, you got Nimmo, you got Lindor, right? You can expect to score 5.5 to 6 runs a game. I would be shocked if the New York Mets aren't top 3 or top 5 in runs scored per game. So if you can get a guy like that gives you, a 3.54, 3.64 ERA, maybe even a little bit better, but even if it is a little bit worse, if he's giving up between 3 runs, 3.5 runs per ball game, and you're scoring 5 or 6 per ball game, you're going to win those games. And if you look at it, if you average out the whole entire ERA when it comes to Luis Castillo, averaging 6 innings, around 3 runs per ball game, that's pretty damn good. And that's what I like about Luis Castillo. Now, again, I'm on record. I'd rather just sign Corbin Burnes and call it a day, where Corbin Burnes is obviously better than Luis Castillo. But we're trying to get into the mind of David Stearns here, right? Are you going to pay 8 years, $250+ million for a guy in Corbin Burnes that's probably going to give you 4 of his best years in the first 4 of those years, and the last 4 of those years is God knows what? Hopefully in those 4 years you win a World Series, and then you can live with a lot of that. But it's been a trend, and David Stearns, I don't think he's going to do that. And I don't think Sean Manaea or Walker Buehler or Sean Manaea and whatever pitcher you want to talk about with Sean Manaea, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's good enough. We act like the pitching wasn't the problem once we got into the playoffs. It was. I love Sean Manaea. I want him back. But I also want another guy that's at the top of the rotation. If Sean Manaea pitches like last year and we got a Luis Castillo, guess how much better that rotation is just for the first 2 guys at the top of the rotation. And you have Kodai Senga, and you got David Peterson, and you got Frankie Montas, and possibly Clay Holmes. Like, that just makes so much. And I agree, Juan. Corbin Burnes, Sean Manaea, call it a day. Let's go. I'd be perfectly fine with that. But Luis Castillo and Manaea sound perfectly fine as well. All right, guys, I'm going to check the comments really quick. Yeah, I know the Luzardo thing, but he's been injured the last 2 seasons, and I know he has really good stuff. But again, I think Luzardo is more of a question mark than Luis Castillo. And 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago, there was a lot of talk about Luzardo coming to the Mets for Brett Beatty, and the Mets didn't do it. Now, it sounds laughable now that the Mets didn't do that, but let's be honest, guys. Not a lot of people wanted to do it. They didn't want to get rid of Brett Beatty. So, it's not a shock that it actually didn't happen. Luzardo was actually one of the better pitchers in baseball. But again, he's been injured the last couple of seasons, and I don't want another if, right? I seen Luis Castillo throw 170 plus innings. He can do that. That's not an issue. That is not an issue at all. Same thing with Corbin Burns, 180 inning guy. I'm fine with that, right? I need guys to give me innings, and I want a guy that actually I'm confident in when he goes on the mound, that every time he goes on the mound, we have a great chance to win. And as much as Showman I had provided that, he provided that. But the reason why everybody fell in love with him was because there was nothing else to go for. He just pitched better than everybody else. And I don't want to rely on that again. I want to have Showman I plus something just as good, if not better. Like, we can have two of those and still be very good to sign a Pete Alonso. Or if the Mets go a different round and sign Anthony Santander, put him at first base. There's so many different options here where I think that with a rotation that can provide stability and quality starts. Stability was key. And if we have stability, Jameson, Christian Scott, he's coming back from Tommy John. He's probably not going to be back until the middle of the season. So I'm not counting on that, right? And this is the other thing why I want to get like a Luis Castillo or guys similar to that. Because everybody talks about Brandon Sproat. Why do we have to rush a kid that technically might not be ready? But because his name came up last year in how well he's pitched, everybody gets excited. Why rush him? If he's ready by midseason, then you bring him up, right? If he looks too good and he's just mowing down AAA and there's no reason to keep him down anymore, bring him up. But if he's coming to the majors and the Mets do get, say, Sean Manaea and Walker Buehler, everybody, as soon as the Mets rotation starts to struggle, because let's be honest, every rotation struggles at some point, you're going to have Met fans clamoring to bring up Sproat probably before he's ready. And what you don't want to do is thinking that he feels like he has to, be the savior like Christian Scott felt like he had to do. And the Mets were trying to limit his innings, regardless of how well he pitched. They were taking him out of the ball game before, basically at the end of the fifth inning, if he even got that far. That's what I don't want. Brandon Sproat's going to come up and they're going to limit his innings. What is the point of having a guy throw 4.5, 5 innings and then call it a day? No matter how good he's pitching, you're taking him out of the ballgame, regardless of the pitch count. They're taking him out. That annoys me. And it annoyed me with Christian Scott last year because everybody got excited for what? The guy could be pitching a perfect game. They're taking him out in the fifth inning. It's the stupid concept that analytics completely pisses me off. And that's why Brandon Sproat, until he's ready and he gets the innings under his belt in the minor leagues, because that's what I care about. I can care less how he pitches, stuff-wise in AAA. We all know what type of stuff he has. 99 to 100 miles an hour, a couple of nasty breaking balls and his off-speed pitches. We know what he has. I want to get those innings up. Christian Scott didn't even pitch more than 70 innings in his professional career before we came up with the Mets. I want Brandon Sproat to get innings under his belt. If we can actually get him to an 80, 90 innings, maybe I can feel a little bit comfortable later in the year where the Mets can extend him a little bit. Because it's pointless when you got a guy that could be damn good, but you got to take him out in the fifth inning because of pitch count, because of innings limits, or whatever. And the Mets, why do you think Christian Scott got hurt? Because the Mets, if you notice, when guys were starting to fall by the wayside in the rotation, they were trying to push Christian Scott a little bit. And what happens? He wasn't used to it because they kept on taking him out early, and then he got hurt. So why do that to Brandon Sproat? You can get guys either on the free agent market or the trade market to solidify your rotation and leave Brandon Sproat to develop more. We all talk, everybody, all these prospect huggers want to talk about these prospects. Yet, what if they're not ready? Just because he had one good minor league season, everybody's jumping off the ship like, oh, let's bring him up, bring him up, bring him up. Why? Develop him. That's why you get Luis Castillo. And that's why the Mets are interested in Luis Castillo. That's why they're probably more interested in Luis Castillo over Corbin Burnes, because the money is drastic. I don't think the money's the issue. The years are drastic. Let me rephrase that. The years are drastic. 3 years with Luis Castillo, possible vested fourth option, or 8 years of Corbin Burnes. There's no argument who's better. And again, I still lean on Corbin Burnes, but I still think Luis Castillo is more possible. And again, I'm okay with Luis Castillo. He's a consistent, very good pitcher that you can throw at the top of your rotation. He'll give you really good starts every 5th day. And then you can get a Sean Manaea or a Walker Buehler and solidify that rotation. You need a stopgap. When you're on a losing streak, you're like, oh, great, we can hopefully count on Kodai Senga or maybe Manaea. And I like Manaea, but I mean, come on, guys. Like, everybody has the book on him now. Everybody's seen video of his new mechanics. I hope he pitches the same way. That would be a godsend. That would be great for the New York Mets. But it's more likely that he probably won't, because he hasn't been consistent in his career. And he's getting older. So we don't know if he can do it again. And to rely on that, if you don't get a top-line starter, and rely on Manaea to do what he did last year, if not more, and he doesn't, and I'm not saying pitch bad, but pitches a little bit worse, then what? Guess what we'll be looking for at the trade deadline, guys? A top-line starting pitcher, where we probably have to pay more to get a top-line starter at the trade deadline and give up more prospects than we probably actually would have in the offseason. No, Ken, but that's the point, though. Now they have a book on him with his new mechanics, the different way he throws, the video of how he throws now, right? There's more information on Manaea when teams were seeing him for the first time, and even some for the second time. We're still trying to catch up and figure out what he's doing and how his arm angle is and how he's throwing, how it's coming from basically the first base side and coming into righties and what he's doing to lefties. There's a lot involved in that. And sometimes it does take a full year for teams to realize what's going on and to how to adjust and maybe take better at-bats against him. We see it all the time in baseball, where a pitcher was lights out the whole year. They come back next year and they look like they can't even get a guy out. This is not new in baseball. This has happened so many times. Ken, again, this is a yearly thing here. That's what you don't understand. We see it all the time, right? Look when Tyler McGill first came up onto the scene, right? Pitched opening day. Looked good for like 2 months. And basically, Manaea had about 3.5 months of really good, really, really good, but he wasn't good until probably mid-June when everything turned around. So we had about 3.5 months of that new mechanics. And as much technology is really good now, you see it all the time, right? Tyler McGill was pitching good the first time we ever seen him. And then the following year, he looked like he couldn't even stay in a rotation. And I'm not saying Manaea is going to be bad, right? But to count on him just being as lights out as he was last year is not a smart play if I'm David Stearns. That's what I'm saying. It's not, I do want Manaea back, but I want him back as our solid, badass number 2. And Ken, don't give me Senga because he hasn't pitched in a whole year. And he needs to pitch every 6th day. He needs 5 days of rest and pitch every 6th day. I'm sorry, I don't count that as an ace. There's too much question mark with Kodai Senga. I'm sorry. Ken, no, but he hasn't been good since basically before the pandemic, Sean Manaea. So let's not act like he was good 2 years ago. He wasn't. He hasn't been good since he was with Oakland. Like that's more than 2 years ago. I don't care what he did 4 years ago. The same reason why I don't care what Senga did in 2023. That was irrelevant. Because that was basically a complete wash of a season where there was no pressure on a guy. And to put that much on Kodai Senga, who hasn't pitched more than 6 innings this year, and then call him my ace, is crazy. Now, I hope Kodai Senga is badass. That makes me feel a hell of a lot better. But again, I don't need a pitcher pitching every 6 days. It's so stupid. You know, I don't know if I can be comfortable going into a rotation with Kodai Senga. You don't even know if he's healthy. He's still not throwing a baseball, by the way. So Kodai Senga still not throwing a baseball, and it's December 15th. We're 2 months away from pitchers and the catchers. I know that seems like a long time, but when you got to work out and stretch yourself out and be ready for spring training, not that much time. So something's going on with Kodai Senga that they're not telling us. And until we know, which we probably won't because Mets don't leak anything out, there's a reason why they sent their head athletics trainer to Japan to work with Kodai Senga. Why? He's supposed to be healthy. We pitched him in the freaking playoffs. If he wasn't healthy, why would he pitch in the playoffs? We pitched him game 1 instead of Sean Manaea, who was on perfect rest. So either they were bullshitting us the whole time and trying to get one over on the Dodgers in game 1 and try to sneak out a win, or they're just downright stupid. Because all the success that Stearns had and Mendoza had and the Mets had during that season, the dumbest decisions were during the playoffs. There was no reason why Kodai Senga should be pitching in the Philadelphia series in the NLDS. No reason why he's pitching game 1 of the NLCS against the Dodgers when Sean Manaea was available for game 1. Stupid decision. They knew he wasn't going deep into a ball game. They knew they're probably going to take him out no more than 2 innings. What was the point? Now you had to throw your bullpen in there in game 1, and you have a whole series to worry about. So I'm sorry. They thought of Manaea so much, and if everybody wants to call Manaea an ace, go right ahead. Even the Mets threw Kodai Senga in game 1 over Sean Manaea. That's what they thought about Sean Manaea. Yeah, very good. But let's pitch him in game 2. Sorry, there shouldn't be a question when your ace starter has enough rest to start game 1. You start your ace on game 1. No question. There was a question. There was a thought process of not pitching Sean Manaea on full rest in game 1 and through Kodai Senga. So don't tell me they believe that Sean Manaea is an ace. Sorry. If there was a no doubt Sean Manaea is an ace, you pitch him in game 1, regardless of the situation, as long as he's on full-time rest, and he was. They went to Kodai Senga that at best was going to pitch 2 innings. Even if he was decent, he was going to pitch 2 innings. So what are we doing here? Let's not act like we're the only ones thinking this. Sean Manaea was damn good last year. But he was considered the ace because everybody else wasn't good enough. If the Mets had a better rotation, Sean Manaea would be a number 2. Yeah, Ken, you never know. But you know why they thought that. But this is the process that I'm talking about. Like, don't tell me that Sean Manaea is an ace, and then the Mets threw Kodai Senga game 1, and they didn't have a doubt. Why were they worried? Because they saw Sean Manaea starting to break down a little bit. They were concerned about Sean Manaea behind the scenes. It was clear. They were trying to give Sean Manaea an extra day, and it burned them. Unfortunately, if they want to go that route, if they want to go to Manaea and Buehler route, I don't want to hear nothing about a trade deadline a top line starter acquisition. Because that's going to be the case. And it's pointless when you have. No, Ken, I saw your sarcasm. There is no point leaving that up to discussion or the possibility of needing that at the trade deadline. It does not make sense. I'm not saying you sign Corbin Burns, trade for Luis Castillo, and one of them get hurt, and now you need a top line starter anyway. That's different. That means they did their job, and you can't plan for that. But if you leave Corbin Burns or Luis Castillo off your team, you're just going to need it at the trade deadline. We act like we're not going to need it. Even if Manaea and Corey Seager are serviceable or are pretty good, you're still going to need a top-line starter. It's idiotic. It's pointless when it's available right now. And I want to see them do it. I'm sorry. I don't care if they get Pete Alonso. I don't care if they get multiple guys in a bullpen and now the Mets have a solid bullpen. I'm sorry. If the Mets don't get a top-line starter, their grade for the offseason is a B at best. Juan Soto already gives you probably a B minus. Pete Alonso is going to take that minus away and bring in a B. But the only way it's going to be a grade A is if you get a top-line starter. And if they do that, they're more set up to be successful early on in the season, right? Here's the other thing, guys. Let's get Manaea, let's get Buehler. Let's not even get a top-line starter. What is the guarantee that we're not going to start off slow again? And then we have to fight back in the middle months and then use all our energy, all our passion, all our craziness to get back into a race. And then we break down at the end. Deja vu all over again. I'm sick of that. Go in with a team that there's less question marks going into the season. That's not that hard. That's what I don't understand. And I understand that there's more out there, more than enough out there to solidify this roster. And why they're not doing, again, there's still guys available, so I'm not going to jump on Stearns yet. But I am a little frustrated because they can jump on guys already. They could sign Alonso already. Everybody knows I'm not the biggest Alonso fan, but it'd be stupid to think that he's not one of the better players on the market right now. Like, you could sign Alonso tomorrow. Why aren't they doing that? You could sign Burns tomorrow. You can trade for Luis Castillo today. What is the holdup? How many more times are you going to call Seattle about packages? At some point, you know you got to take on most of the money, if not all the money for Luis Castillo anyway. How many players can be exchanged here? You're taking on most of the money, so the package is going to be very little. Corbin Burns, how many times are you going to negotiate with this guy? At some point, get it done. Like, I just don't understand. Yeah, Ken, I love to have number twos. Sure. You want to call Manaea number two? Go ahead. I think he could be. But that means that he has to be a little worse than what he was last year. That would be a number two, which I'm perfectly fine with. But I think there's a better chance he'll pitch like a number three. Because I don't care what he did 3 years ago. I don't. Last year was awesome. But to count on what he did last year and take it to the bank, I think it's a silly philosophy. Now, I hope he can. But we'll see. But I like Luis Castillo. He's a solid pitcher, gives you innings, gives you quality starts. Normally, most of the time give you 6 innings, 3 runs. You got a lineup like you hope the Mets are going to have. They're going to get another bat, if that's Santander, Alonso, Bregman, whatever. That's going to give you more than enough of an offense in a line, especially with any of those guys, that you can easily score between 5 and 6 runs per ball game. So if you get a pitcher throwing, 6 innings, 3 runs, giving up 3 runs a ball game, you have a really good chance of winning a lot of games. So I'm ready to get that top line starter. I think the Mets are going to get Castillo. Let's start with the other topic, guys. Bregman or Alonso? I know, I know that's not going to excite a lot of people, and people are like, why would you sign Bregman? You can just sign Alonso. Okay, I tend to agree with you guys, but bring back. Yeah, let me start this way. Put your mind in the mind of David Stearns, right? I don't know why. Every time they ask Stearns about Pete Alonso, yeah, he's a Met. You know, he's a great Met. Fans love him. Fan favorite, blah, 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 all that nonsense that we always hear. But if you read between the lines of what David Stearns says, right, longevity is one of the things he says when it comes to when asked about Pete Alonso. You know, success for their career, how they're going to help this team going forward. Talks about versatility a lot. Now, again, I'm not going to cry if Pete Alonso gets signed by the New York Mets because he is another force in that lineup that makes it dangerous. But I'm not going to lie. Alex Bregman does intrigue me because you could do a lot more things. You can put Vientos at DH. You can sign a Christian Walker. Or you could put Vientos at first base. You can manipulate the lineup a lot of different ways. I think that would be an interesting way to go about it because we're hearing more and more rumblings about Mets' connection to Bregman. And again, Bregman, I think, has been more successful as an overall player than Pete Alonso. You know, we fall in love with Pete Alonso's power and lack or not understand what Bregman has done in his career. Now, Pete Alonso, the limited number of at-bats that he has in the playoffs, not all his fault. The Mets haven't made the playoffs during his time, except for 2 years, right? He's had a very solid postseason when he got there. He's had a lot of big hits. I like what I've seen from Pete Alonso, right? Because if Pete Alonso, and I can guarantee this, if Pete Alonso did not hit that home run in Milwaukee and the Mets lose in that wild card series, there would be a lot more Mets fans not wanting Pete Alonso back. But because he hit that home run, then he hit another big home run against the Phillies and still had a very good postseason, right? It changes minds of Met fans, and that's understandable. And again, I'm not saying that Bregman over Alonso is a better plan. I'm not, right? You got Juan Soto. I think you can put Bregman, you could put Alonso, you could put Santander, and the lineup's still going to be dynamic and still going to be one of the better lineups in baseball or better offenses in baseball. I still believe, I've been saying this for months, and I'm going to continue to say it. I don't believe Pete Alonso is going to take any type of discount to come back to the New York Mets. And this is where David Stearns comes in. I don't think David Stearns, if a team offers him 7 or 8 years, I don't think David Stearns is going to go that far in terms of years. I don't think the money's the issue. I don't think they care if it's $30 million for Pete Alonso a year. The years matter. I don't think the Mets are going to give more than 6 years to Pete Alonso. There's going to be a team out there that's going to be desperate, that might have lost out on more free agents, that might give Pete Alonso that 7th year, possibly 8th year, and roll up closer to $200 million. And I think that's where the Mets are drawing the line. I think they might go 6. They can definitely go 6 years. I don't think the money matters. Maybe they can give him 6 years, 190, 185. But if Pete Alonso is looking for that 7th, 8th year, he's not going to be a New York Met, guys. I'm sorry. I know that might annoy, that might make people a little uncomfortable, but it's a fact. Right? If all we heard from these reporters, Pete Alonso loves the New York Mets. He loves the Mets. He loves being in New York. Why can't he take a few $1 million left? Maybe 1 year less, right? Why can't he do it? Right? He hired Scott Boras for a reason. Not to take less money. And look, I won't be mad at Pete Alonso if he takes more money to go elsewhere. That's his right. Right? But he didn't hire Scott Boras to easily remain a New York Met. I don't think David Stearns, now this might lead to Cohen stepping in, which would be another interesting story within itself. I don't think David Stearns is going to go more than 6 years for Pete Alonso. That's where Steve Cohen might pop in and come into this picture and say, I want Pete Alonso here. What was the offer? We'll either match it. And here's the other thing, guys. What if, let's say, Chicago Cubs, right? I know there's a lot going on. They got Kyle Tucker. Who knows if they're going to spend more money? But let's say the Chicago Cubs gives 8 years. Let me just do the math really quick. Let's say, boom. 7 years, $200 million. $28.5 million per year. Pete Alonso comes back and says, if you match this number, I'll be a New York Met. Would they do that? No, I don't think that's a crazy number for Pete Alonso. I'm not saying I wouldn't go to 7 years. But I don't know if David Stearns is going to do that. I just don't. Well, and Hector's in the chat right now, blunt thoughts, right? Yeah, I agree. I don't think the Mets love him. With all the analytics now, with all the way they have all these things to basically show how a body's going to develop throughout their years, and all these, all this technology and all this medical stuff that basically can tell how a player is going to grow and get older body-wise. There's a lot of people, and the Mets might be included in this, that don't think Pete Alonso is going to age well. Now, again, I'm not saying you're going to have to believe that or agree with that, but they believe that. They believe in this stuff. And again, I don't know why they use that as a end all be all, but these teams live by this. And David Stearns is a part of that fabric cut from that cloth. It's just the way it is, right? I don't necessarily agree with that, but this is how they evaluate all these players. Everybody they sign, everybody they trade for, right? They have so many medicals, so much information on these players. They get down to the 0.1 body fat of these players. And there's a lot of things that they might show that says that. I don't understand. I don't understand any of it. But David Stearns is not going to not sign Pete Alonso just because of that, in my opinion. There's a lot of other factors that are involved. But again, I don't think, I just don't see them going past 6 years. And I feel like there's somebody that's going to give him a 7, maybe even 8th year to Pete Alonso. And if that's the case, Pete Alonso's gone. And I'm not saying the Mets can't win if they sign Christian Walker and, bring in Luis Castillo. I mean, you're still going to get 30 home runs, 35 home runs from Christian Walker. I mean, he don't play in a bandbox in Arizona. And, you're already adding 30-plus home runs for Juan Soto. So that's 60-plus home runs from two guys when you probably get 45 from Pete Alonso. So you're already getting more home runs and stretching out your lineup. a little bit more. Now, I know people don't like to hear that. Oh, you're stretching out your lineup, but you can get 45 home runs with Pete Alonso. Yeah, but how many times have I told you that Pete Alonso hits those home runs in so many garbage time scenarios that it really does not matter? And then you put on top of it is runners in scoring position numbers are absolutely garbage. So it's always and also, Ken, Vladimir Guerrero might have a lot to do with this with the New York Mets. Like, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but because Vladimir Guerrero is what, 3-4 years younger than Pete Alonso, that's why it's more intriguing to the New York Mets. Because there's a pretty good chance that Pete Alonso in 3 years is the DH. And I'm not saying this. I'm just trying to think the way David Stearns and the way baseball is coveted. And Ken, you could talk about Vladimir Guerrero being fat. He was fat 3 years ago. He lost a ton of weight. And again, I'm just saying what he did. He lost a ton of weight. But look, I am not saying any of that stuff I believe in, because I look at numbers and that's all I care about. That's why I keep on driving the fact of Pete Alonso runners in scoring position. And in his entire career, his season home runs are a lot more padded than people want to believe. And people started to look at it this year because he's becoming a free agent. Now Met fans actually want to turn their heads and be like, oh, wow, look at those numbers. Those numbers are true. They were true this whole time. Nobody wanted to believe him, especially Met fans. But when they started to turn on him during the season, guess what? All these numbers started to pop up out of nowhere, and then it started to become national. And now everybody knows of it. So I was saying this for a while now. Nobody wanted to believe it. Yet I still want Alonso over Bregman, over Anthony Santander. Because I still think Pete Alonso still brings something to this Mets team, along with Juan Soto, along with Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos, Alvarez, in this lineup. But at the same time, I'm telling you what the numbers did. Chris did an entire video about Pete Alonso, not just last year, stats. Throughout his career, it's been a pattern with Pete Alonso. His numbers look great, but if you peel it a little by little off the surface and you start to dig in deeper into the numbers and where these numbers are and how many garbage time home runs, no matter if the Mets are 10 runs ahead or 10 runs down, the amount of home runs Pete Alonso's hit in garbage times outweighs by a decent margin the home runs he hits in crucial and clutch situations, specifically with runners on. Yet, I still rather have Pete Alonso than the guys I just mentioned. Okay, stop with the Alonso has to have protection stuff. Pete Alonso was supposed to be the protection for other players. Could we stop this? Met fans used to treat Pete Alonso like he was a top baseball player in baseball, where he never was. Let's stop this. Pete Alonso was supposed to be the protection for other people in the lineup, not the other way around. This is so idiotic. I just don't understand why people say that. Pete Alonso was supposed to be the protection. Why should he have protection? That means what you're saying is hypocritical. So you're telling me Pete Alonso never had protection. So you're telling me Pete Alonso was never actually good as you actually portrayed him. Right? Aaron Judge didn't have protection. Why was he hitting 50 home runs? Batting over 320. 120 plus RBIs. Consistently, by the way. Who did he have? There were some Met fans at some point that were putting Pete Alonso on the same level as Aaron Judge. I'm sorry. When a guy needs protection, you are no longer the player that everybody portrayed you to be. I'm sorry. I'm sick and tired of calling Pete Alonso the guy when everybody's like, oh, he never had protection in the lineup. He was the best player on this team. People portrayed him as the best player on this team for years. So why wasn't he good enough to protect somebody else? Because he wasn't good enough. That's why. Please, let's stop this nonsense, guys. That's a fact. Lindor had his best season when he got away from Pete Alonso in the lineup as the leadoff guy. Why is that? Because Pete Alonso isn't good enough to protect anybody. Teams were pitching around other guys to get to Pete Alonso. I'm sorry, guys. That is not the best player on your team. Unfortunate, but it's true. Reality has to kick in sometimes. And the fact that Mets fans portrayed him as the best player and the man, yet they come back, well, he never had protection. Well, I thought he was good enough to be the protector, but I guess he's not. It is amazing, just 1 year where Pete Alonso runners in scoring position were at an all-time low. It was terrible. Even worse than years prior. They weren't good years prior, but this was on another level. And the national media started picking up. And now Mets fans started to turn on Pete Alonso a little bit. And then everything came out. All the numbers are getting break down now. And everybody realized that, wow, Pete Alonso isn't as good as everybody portrayed. Yet, Pete Alonso is probably the best option compared to Bregman, compared to Anthony Santander. So, no, Stanton never plays. Stanton doesn't play during the season. Different story when it gets to the playoffs, but then why does Judge bat under 200 and does nothing in the playoffs with Stanton behind him, who's having an all-world playoffs? Stanton's usually injured in the season during the season anyway, so protection for Judge is irrelevant, right? Let's just put Juan Soto, for example. Look, Juan Soto doesn't need Judge to protect him, but this year, Judge was behind him the majority of the year. Juan Soto had his best season. So, I mean, the stats are the stats. All right, let's get to the next topic. Enough with Pete Alonso. I still think the Mets are going to sign Pete Alonso, but it is interesting that the Mets have starting to get a little bit more interested in Alex Bregman. And that's just a topic to bring up because that's just a fact. Well, no, Ken, I don't think Soto needed protection. I don't think the Mets need Soto to hit 40 home runs. Like, we all know he played at Yankee Stadium. He had a little cheapie. He probably had about 3 to 5 cheapies throughout the season. So I'm cutting it out to be Soto can hit between 30 and 35 home runs and still knock in 90 to 100 RBIs and bat 280. That's not something that, I think Yankee Stadium had more with Juan Soto's numbers than Aaron Judge did. But that doesn't mean Juan Soto didn't see better pitches because Aaron Judge was behind him. Like, how many times have teams walked whoever was batting third or wherever Pete Alonso was, whoever's in batting in front of Pete Alonso, they were basically pitching around them. They weren't giving him nothing to hit because they know they can get Pete Alonso out. Like, it's crazy. But that was what was happening all year, and we all knew it was happening. We all watched it. Eugene, thank you. Nobody was talking about protecting Pete Alonso when he was hitting 50 home runs, right? That didn't matter. So you can't talk about it now. What's the difference? Why was his average better when he was hitting 50 home runs? Now it's down. Home runs are down, and then average is down. And now we're going to blame everybody else, but the guy that's actually supposed to be the protector. Pete Alonso was supposed to be the protector. So him needing protection, you just told me that he's not the best player on the team. Or he's not the player that you all portrayed him as. Let's get that fact straight. That's what you just told me. So all the Mets fans that are just, tripping over themselves for the Mets to bring back Pete Alonso are the same ones that, oh, Peter Alonso didn't have no protection in the lineup. He was not supposed to have protection in the lineup. He was supposed to protect anybody else that was in front of him. He never done that. At least to the point where people actually portrayed him that he did. So that's where we are with that. But again, I still think Pete Alonso is going to be a New York Met. How that happens, when that happens, your best is as good as mine. Sean Manaea, right? We talked about him briefly when we talked about Castillo. I would love Castillo, Manaea as the two pitchers to come in this rotation. I thought that would be a hell of a lot better than what people are talking about. What is the price tag for Sean Manaea? You know, I'm hearing people talk about 4 years, $100 million, 25 per, which I do think Sean Manaea is going to get between $24 and $26 million a year. Like, I mean, Severino got $22 million, and we all know Manaea was much better than Luis Severino. So he's probably going to get between $24 to $26 million per year, and he's probably looking for a 4-year deal. So you're looking at a price tag for Sean Manaea, 4 years, $100 million. I would bring him back. I don't think that's too much of an outrageous number, but again, what is David Stearns thinking? I know that's crazy to say, but it's true. Right? I do think that Sean Manaea is worth that. I think the Mets would be comfortable with giving him a 3-year deal, but there's somebody that's going to be out there that's going to give him a 4th-year deal. I don't know if that's a deal breaker for the New York Mets. I doubt it's a deal breaker for the Mets because prior to the winter meetings, we heard there was some rumblings that the Mets and Manaea are kind of, you know, getting closer and closer to a match. So we haven't heard any news after that. So I don't know where it's at. I don't know if it broke down. I don't know if they're talking still. I don't know. But the price tag is probably going to be somewhere between $24 and $26 million per year. And I'm assuming, which the projections look like, Manaea is probably looking for a 4-year deal, where the Mets probably be comfortable with a 3-year deal. So I think most of us, Fredo, I know a 3-year option with a 4th-year club option is nice, but that doesn't sound good for the player because after the 3rd year, if you don't pitch well, there's a pretty good chance that the team's not going to, take on that option for another $25 million. So that's not really benefiting the player. Now, and that's I don't think the Mets would have any problem giving it 3 years with a 4th-year club option. Now, what you could do to make it a little bit more sweeter for the player is 3-year with the 4th year being a vesting option where multiple things can happen. Like if Sean Manaea throws 170 innings, that option gets vested. And if he doesn't, it's gone. The option's not there. So I think there's going to be somebody that gives them a guaranteed 4th year, and that's where the Mets have to decide if they're willing to do that or not. The money's not the issue. It's the extra year. So am I comfortable with Sean Manaea getting that 4th year? I am. I'm not worried about that at all. I think he's still going to be good enough where you're not going to be like, damn, we gave him $26 million and he pitched like this. I don't think that's going to be the case for Sean Manaea. I think he's still going to be another solid pitcher. I think he can definitely be a number 2, at worst being a number 3, which is where in the line these pitchers are getting paid. So you're not overpaying for Sean Manaea here. So I don't think that's much of it. I think that extra year is an issue. It might not be for us, but for David Stearns, it might be. In New York Mets, it might be. So next up, last is the untouchable prospects. This is leading back to the first topic with Luis Castillo. Who is untouchable? Now, I don't think the big time prospects are going to be, even one of them are going to be added to a trade that involves Luis Castillo because the Mets are going to take on that entire contract. But let's just think about other possible trades. Whatever they might be. I don't care about the names at this point. But let's say there's a pitcher out there or a bat out there that the Mets want. But it's going to take 2 top 10 prospects and another prospect from the between 10 and 15th prospect. Who's untouchable? At the moment, I would say Sproat's probably untouchable. I think David Stearns doesn't like to give pitching away in the farm. But we all know about the logjam in this farm system with the middle infielders. These guys can't play everywhere. There's not enough room on the roster, and most of them are probably at best a third baseman, could be a second baseman. Yeah, I know Jet Williams could play some center field, but there's at least one, possibly two, that should be trade assets to make your team better. Now, I'll leave it up to you guys on who you think is untouchable. There was a poll the other day where somebody says, who are you less willing to trade between the Mets' top prospects? There was Luis Acuna, Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams, and I think the other one was Ronnie Mauricio. If I'm not, Brandon, was it Ronnie Mauricio? Yeah, it was Ronnie Mauricio, right? Do you believe most people weren't willing to trade Jet Williams out of the other three? That is so idiotic. And this is the problem with Mets fans when it comes to their farm system. Because Jet Williams was talked about so much 2 years ago and how good he was and his range and the bat and all this stuff. This guy is projected probably not to be a big power hitter at all. He might be a 20 home run guy at best. He has a tremendous amount of speed. He has really good range defensively in shortstop in particular, but second base and center field. But we're talking about a guy that is probably at best a 20 home run guy. Yeah, he's dynamic in the field. Yes, he's dynamic in the base paths. He has a quick bat, but he's not a power guy. What are we doing here? I'm sorry. I'm not trading Jet Williams to get the guy I want. If that's going to hold up a trade, then I don't even know where we're ever going to make a move here. And this is the other problem that leads to everything I've been saying this whole time. Every time when the Mets made the playoffs, either made a run and made it interesting in the playoffs, the following year they half-assed the offseason and or the deadline where they didn't do enough, and we end up going through another season where it wasn't good enough, and we're starting to question the moves in the offseason, the moves at the trade deadline, or the lack of moves at the offseason, or the lack of moves at the deadline. Well, Ken, here's the funny thing. Why are the Padres trying to get rid of Arise when he's the batting champion 3 years in a row? Why isn't everybody clamoring for Luis Arise? Because he does nothing well except hit the ball and hit for average. He does nothing else well. He's not a base stealer. His defense is okay. Like, people aren't clamoring to get Arise. There's a reason why he's been on 3 teams in 3 years. Right? Teams don't value that anymore. Again, I love average. I take Arise tomorrow. Throw him at second base and we call it a day. But again, I like average. I take Luis Arraez in a second. I think average, especially in a lineup that has power, obviously makes sense. But again, if you look at his on-base percentage, it's not good. For a guy who was the batting champion, has the highest average in baseball, his on-base percentage is lower than you would expect. And he only gets on base when he gets hits. He doesn't work walks. He doesn't have, it's weird. But I like average. I talk about average a lot on my channel. Most of baseball doesn't care anymore about average, but I do. Right? I cared that Vientos hit over 300 last year, along with the power. No, Ken, I never said that. I'm one of the proponents of everybody talks about home runs like it's the end all be all. I don't care about that. Give me a guy who drives in runs. You don't need to drive it. You can drive in runs without hitting home runs. I don't care about home runs. I really don't. I think home runs are making baseball worse off than it is because it drops down the average. There's more strikeouts. No, Ken, you're wrong. Chris has talked about power. He's a big proponent, not me. I don't care about power. If I did, why am I on board with Pete Alonso? If that's the case, then Pete Alonso is supposed to be my favorite player, right? I hate that Nimmo tried to be a power hitter. I think it's stupid. He's better off being more of an average guy and an on-base guy to help this team. Yeah, Ken, you're definitely hearing things. I don't say that about power at all. I'd rather have run producers where they can get their runs and get their RBIs, not relying on the home run so much. But baseball is like this. Yeah, Nimmo hits 25 home runs. Wonderful. And his strikeouts went up, his walks went down, his average went down. So great. Let's hit more home runs. Yeah, Ken, you can do that, but I don't like home runs. I'm more of an average guy, right? I know where baseball's going. I don't necessarily like it. They don't talk about average. They think average is a useless stat, which is hilarious to me. Power is where baseball is going. I don't like it, but it's a fact. David Stearns the other day said the other day, I was listening to the Evan Roberts podcast, and he played a quote from David Stearns that says, the easiest way to score runs is home runs. That's what David Stearns says. No, Ken, I just talked about it now with Jet Williams, right? I said fans are talking up Jet Williams. They would rather not trade Jet Williams than any other guy I mentioned, prospect I mentioned. Yet, this is the guy that's probably not going to be a 20 home run guy. I'm just proving a point of what he's probably going to be power-wise because people love power. I don't give a shit. You can actually have a guy that hits 20 home runs or less than that and still be a productive player on this team. I agree, Ken. There is too many 220 hitters. But why is that? Because they worry about the launch angle, worry about home runs. And that's the problem with baseball. And that's why I had a problem the last few seasons with Brandon Nimmo, because the Mets believe that hitting for more home runs makes them better. Yet Brandon Nimmo can hit 20 to 25 home runs without changing his entire approach. I don't like Nimmo hitting 25 home runs because he changed his approach, but his batting average is 25 points down. His strikeouts are way up. His walks are down. His on base is down. How does that make sense? Not when you had a guy like Nimmo who should be a number 2 hitter. That makes no sense. There's a pretty good chance if the Mets re-sign Pete Alonso that Brandon Nimmo is going to be batting 5th. Like, okay. It's weird. It's a weird concept where they're changing players that don't need any change. Nimmo didn't need a change. Nimmo can bat 275, 20 home runs, 75 RBIs. His on-base percentage is badass. His strikeouts are down. And it makes him a better player. It makes him better for the New York Mets. I don't care if Nimmo was on the Chicago Cubs and they need him to hit 25 home runs or 28 home runs. Different story. The Mets don't need him to do that anymore. That's the annoying part. Yeah, Ken, but I don't think it's just the hitting coaches. That's the problem. It's the organization. It's Major League Baseball. Every team will tell you that home runs is the easiest way to get runs. They don't care about batting average. They don't care about strikeouts. As long as you hit a 3-run homer in a game, you can go 1 for 5 with 4 strikeouts. But you hit that 3-run homer, it dropped your batting average by about 7 points. But that's okay because you got that 3-run home run. See, I think it's hilarious to me. All right, guys, so let's end the stream by saying the New York Mets still need a lot of work. They're interested in Luis Castillo. They have made calls to the Mariners about Castillo. Obviously, it's not going to take a huge package because the Mets will be taking on the majority, if not all, of the contract. 3 years, around $75 million left on the contract with a fourth year vesting for Luis Castillo. The Mets have been linked more and more over the last few days with Alex Bregman. And that is interesting within itself, but it's a fact. Manaea's price tag is probably going to be anywhere between $24 and $26 million. I think the Mets would be comfortable with a 3-year deal, but there's a pretty good chance that somebody's going to offer him a fourth guaranteed year. Are the Mets willing to do that? We'll see if that happens or not. And untouchable prospects, I don't think there should be any, depending on the player that you could get in return. I think that's when you really got to think about untouchable prospects. I think if it's a guy that can tremendously help this team, I don't care who it is, to be quite honest with you. I know some people are like, oh, you can't trade Brandon Sproat. Of course you can. Who are you getting back? What if there's a top-line starter that becomes available later in this offseason and they want Brandon Sproat? That can be possible. You're going to not trade Brandon Sproat for a guy that has been in the majors, who's already been established, who's proven himself, over a guy just because he has good stuff doesn't mean he's going to make him a good major league pitcher. Give me the guy that has done it over a guy that is still a prospect. A prospect is what the word is, a prospect. So with that said, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live on this football Sunday. Tomorrow, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, the upcoming show tomorrow, Mets Hot Stove at 5 p.m. tomorrow with myself and Chris. And Tuesday, I'll be jumping on with Hector on his channel, obviously talking about the New York Mets. So tomorrow, Mets Hot Stove, 12:16 on a Monday, 5 p.m. with my co-host Chris for Mets Hot Stove. And on Tuesday, I will be with Hector on his show with Blunt Thoughts, talking about the New York Mets and what they're going to do and whatever other topics he's going to have ready to go for me and him to talk about on Tuesday. I think Tuesday might be around 8 o'clock. Tomorrow will be 5 o'clock on Mets Hot Stuff. So with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mets Talk Live. Hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow night on Mets Hot Stove. Myself and Chris, Mets Hot Stove, 5 p.m. Have a good night, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And as always, Met fans, let's go Mets. Have a great night, guys. See you next time.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Critters from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night, keep dreams alive.